This is Democracy Watch. Mark, there is a story that I think is one of the biggest stories coming out of Tuesday night's election that very few people are talking about, and that is the fact that Democrats won by such a large margin. In some places, they swung 7, 8, 9 points to the left from what we saw in 2024. And so in light of that, I'm thinking about the maps that were redrawn in a place like Utah, for example. A judge ordered the Utah map to include one Democratic district. Utah Republicans decided to get cute. They said, we're not going to draw one Democratic district. Instead, we're going to try to draw a gerrymander where we can gerrymander all 4 districts. And so 2 of their districts in Utah in this new map now include an R+2 district and an R+6 district. And so that just means 2 points more Republican than the rest of the country, 6 points more Republican than the rest of the country. Numbers like that would not have survived the election results on Tuesday night. And so in light of what we saw on Tuesday night, how is that making you think about a state like Utah, for example, as we head toward 2026?
Yeah, I think it has huge implications in a state like Utah, right? Because, they made a decision rather than to just sort of concentrate their risk, as you say, in one district, to try to spread it thin and thereby make vulnerable 2 districts. And particularly a state like Utah, which is not a particularly Trump-friendly state to begin with. People forget, there are differences between red states. And some red states are extremely Trump-friendly, like West Virginia, and others, like Utah, actually have a history of standing up to him. And so, I think Republicans there may wind up the day after the election in 2026 realizing that they made a huge mistake, because honestly, they'll probably lose one of those 2, that R+2 district. They'll probably lose it anyway. And so all they're really doing is giving Democrats sort of a free shot to gain 2 rather than 1. Whereas if they had gone the other path, they would have for sure lost 1, but not have a chance of losing both. I think you could probably say the same thing about the decisions that Republicans made in Ohio, where also they were hoping that by, marginally increasing one district and maybe making another one a little worse, like it would net out for them. I'm not sure it will there. Now, I think that's different, though, not to pour cold water on it. That's different than a state like North Carolina or Missouri, where those were just pure pickups for them, right? Like they were just taking Democratic seats and making them Republican seats. So there really there's no downside for what they did.
Can you talk a little bit about Texas? And I ask about that state in particular because the baseline that it seems like they used when they redrew their maps, basically gerrymandering an already existing gerrymander, is watching the ways in which a lot of the Latino voters had moved toward Donald Trump in 2024. And so those new maps use that as a baseline, but we've seen major swings back to the left, at least on Tuesday, among all populations, but especially among the Hispanic populations where they were voting. And so can you talk about what we might expect to see in Texas, given the fact that they did use that 2024 election as their baseline?
Yeah. So, Texas is a lot more complicated. I mean, it's a very big state. It's a very diverse state. The Latino population is quite large. It's also very diverse. And there are really 2 things that happened on Tuesday that I think should cause Republicans in Texas to be very worried. The first is, as you say, there was kind of a uniform swing of Latino voters against them. And you saw that in places that have large Latino populations in New Jersey and Virginia. You also saw it in places that have smaller Latino populations, but where the Latino population is more well established, less immigrant focused. And you also saw those swings. You also, by the way, saw similar swings in other immigrant communities, not just Latino communities, but Asian American communities, South Asian American communities, right? So Texas may be setting itself up for a bad surprise for Republicans. The other thing, though, that I have not heard talked about in the media, and part of it is I think that, they're sort of overwhelmed with everything that's happening. The second is the data is not all in, but it's pretty clear that we also saw higher turnout. And so part of the game that Republicans in Texas have played, and they played this under the old map too, by the way, is that they made certain assumptions about what the rate of participation would be of Latinos, because historically voter turnout rates among Latinos in certain communities in Texas were just lower. They were just lower rates. Of the eligible population, fewer voters chose to vote, particularly in midterm elections. And, at least anecdotally, as I look at the results in Virginia, which I'm very familiar with because I live there, and New Jersey, which I'm very, very familiar with because I grew up around there and have done a lot of politics in New Jersey, the turnout rates were actually pretty strong among the Latino community for a midterm election. I mean, I think it's one of the underreported stories of this election was that it's not like, Democrats won because high propensity, highly educated voters voted, but that lower propensity voters, that are less tuned in didn't vote. I mean, you look at the turnout rates in New York City, you look at the turnout rates in Virginia, you look at the turnout rates in New Jersey, and even, Brian, I did a little bit of an estimate based on what we've seen in California. These were very high turnout rates for, what was on the ballot. And if that persists into 2026, that's the other thing that could lead to an unwelcome surprise for Republicans in Texas.
Well, I want to that end, and I'm going to throw you a little bit of a softball here because some of the criticism here for the Democrats looking to fight fire with fire and redraw their maps in response to Republican efforts to redraw their maps is, okay, well, look at a situation like Tuesday where the Democrats so overperformed, it's not even necessary to engage in this race to the bottom by redrawing these maps and trying to hit Republicans back where they're hitting us. And so why even do it? Why not just focus on driving the voters out to the polls and let democracy sort all of this out?
All right, that's fucking stupid. Okay. And I know who you're referring to because I saw the social media post from the Senate president in Maryland.
That's right. And I'm going to put that tweet right up here on the screen. This tweet is from Bill Ferguson. Tonight's resounding Democratic victory shows we don't need to rig the system to win. When we provide a better vision about the future, lower costs, better services, and real solutions to protect against Trump, voters overwhelmingly choose our leadership. So I guess the simpler question here is, what is your response to folks like Bill Ferguson who say that we don't need to engage in this, we'll just let democracy sort itself out?
Let me tell you something about democracy sorting itself out. Okay. And this, again, is not something that's been commented on. It's something I'm writing for Democracy Docket. So people should be on the lookout for it. In California, there was a pure Democratic election about whether or not there should be new maps. Okay. And it didn't just eke past the finish line. It didn't just break on partisan lines. I mean, you saw an overwhelming vote in California to fight fire with fire. And it's not just California. Take a look at Virginia. What happened in Virginia in the closing days of that election when it looked like Spanberger would win the governor's race, but Democrats would not gain seats in the state legislature and the AG's race would go Republican? What happened? Democrats in the state house said, no, we're going to put redistricting forward. We're going to take steps to redistrict, but in order for us to do it, we're going to have to pass it through two legislatures, one now and one after this election. And so they put redistricting essentially on the ballot. And what you have in Virginia is actually the most extraordinary results of the night. Democrats have 64 seats in the state house. 63, 64, someplace between those two. Okay. But let's even say it's 63. That is a historic number. Okay. There's only 100 seats in the state legislature, in the state house in Virginia, and Democrats gained 13 or 14 seats. And the only thing that was driving those elections beyond what was happening at the very top of the ticket was this referendum, I call it, on redistricting. So for Mr. Ferguson or anyone else to say that somehow this is being done in the back rooms without there being democracy behind it, I ask you to tell that to the millions of people in California and the millions of voters in Virginia who are standing up for democracy. They are standing up for democracy because they don't want Donald Trump to be able to govern like a dictator. They don't want him and his Republican cronies to be able to rig the elections. And they don't want Republicans to be able to steal the House of Representatives by having Republican legislature after Republican legislature redraw maps while Democrats like him sit on their ass and preach about good government. You know what's good government? Good government is responding to what the people of your state, Maryland, want. And you know how I know what the people of Maryland want beyond looking what's happening in Virginia and what just happened in California? Look at what the governor, look what Wes Moore announced on your show that he's doing. Look at what the Speaker of the House has said. Look at what other members of the congressional delegation and the state delegations have said. And thank you, Brian, for breaking that news with Wes Moore.
And I would note to that exact point, Bill Ferguson is not unaccountable to folks. And so for anybody watching right now, if you have a moment, you can pull out your phone and you can call his office and make sure that he understands where we all sit on this scenario, which is, we can either do nothing, capitulate to Republicans who are redrawing maps right now. They've done it in Texas, they've done it in North Carolina, in Ohio, and in Missouri, and they promised to do it in more states. We should be on the lookout for Florida. Or we can actually fight back. That's it. Like, I would love to be in a world where those weren't the only two choices. But the reality is this is a binary choice right now. It's either fight back or do nothing, capitulate to the Republicans and let them win. So if you want to voice your concerns to Bill Ferguson, his number is 410-841-3600. Again, I'm going to put that number right here on the screen, 410-841-3600. Call his office, let him know how you feel, because the reality is nothing changes without pressure. And Mark, I want to thank you as well, because the amount of pressure that you've applied has also had a massive impact. So thank you for your voice. And for folks who are watching right now, if you want to elevate Mark's voice, which could not be more important than it is right now, please sign up for Democracy Docket. It's the news outlet Mark founded to focus on everything voting in elections. I'm going to put that link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. It's a resource that I use on a daily basis. Could not recommend it higher. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Mark Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.